How do you organize your plans? Have you ever thought about that? How do you actually organize your plans for success? Have you ever thought about aligning yourself with a group of individuals that may be able to help you vet your plans? How about taking a self inventory of your personal assessment, personal inventory, self analysis? That's what I'm asking. My name is Ann McNeil, and I am the Master Wealth Builder, helping to build stronger and better lives and businesses utilizing this philosophy of success espoused by Napoleon Hill in this phenomenal book entitled Think and Grow Rich. But I really want to start off with some questions that he asked as a part of his self-analysis questionnaire for personal inventory when you're talking about organizing your plans. And he starts off by asking, have you attained your goals and objectives for the year? How about deliver the best quality, what he calls QQS formula, quality of service, quantity of service of which you are capable? Have you improved your personality? Have you been persistent? How about making prompt decisions, concentration? How about utilizing the benefit of your imagination? Well, today we have a very special guest for you today that will be sharing his journey as a part of answering these questions, but in a very creative kind of way. Our special guest today is none other than Dave Bricker. We're going to give you his bio a little later on. He's a friend from Florida Speakers Association. We've known each other for a very long time. But as I always like to say, I could do this podcast by myself, but today I won't because we do have both of our guest hosts. Yes, guest hosts because we're here sometime and then sometimes we're working. Yes, working on the business of the business. So help me welcome to the show our co-host, and he comes on first, Dr. Peter James. Good morning, Peter. How are you this
Good
morning?
morning. Good morning to you, Ann McNeil. Excited to be here today as we dive into organized planning again, which is such a great philosophy that we need to adopt. We all need to adopt and ask ourselves, how well of planner are we? How organized are we? Or, and how can we get better at this? Because organized planning allows us to have better actions and behaviors, better outcomes as we continue to move forward. And it's always a point of reflection for me. But sometimes, how about this though, Ann? This is huge. Sometimes some of us get stuck in planning and don't execute. Ooh, that's maybe another topic for another day, or maybe we can touch on that a little bit even on this one today. But very excited about our special guest overall. Very excited to dive on into this phenomenal principle today.
All right. Well, before we do that, let's bring on our other guest co-hosts, and that's none other than Galen Bingham. Good morning, Galen. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning. This is going to be an incredible conversation. And as happens to me quite often, as I was reading and preparing for today's conversation, I started I started at the actual title of the principle, and I had to pause. I couldn't get past the title. Organized planning, the crystallization of desire into action. And that's where I got stuck because very often, I know with me, I'll have an idea of something that I want to do, or I have an idea of something I want to achieve, but it's just an idea. And it's not until I start erecting the guardrails or the scaffolding around that idea where it actually starts to come to life. And very often I'm reaching out to members of my mastermind or someone who I really trust to take care of helping me nurture that idea, to help me think through what would be the elements of making this a reality. So just the principle there itself, the title of the principle has a lot of weight for me. So organized planning, the crystallization of desire into action. So who do you have around you that will help nurture that idea to actually turn it into a thing? And for me, it's both of you. So Miss Ann, Dr. Peter, you guys are significant parts of my mastermind as I try to crystallize these ideas. So I thank you for that. Can't wait to get into this conversation. Dave has got some amazing things that he's already put into place to help other people crystallize their ideas. I can't wait to get into this.
Well, you just teed this up for me in a very special way, and I had not thought about it until I started listening to what you were sharing, because our special guest today uh, has been a part of my mastermind for, gosh, I don't know how many years since I first got involved with the Florida Speakers Association, some at least 15 years ago, maybe more. But I just saw him in a very different light. So let's bring on Dave Bricker. Good morning, as I share a little bit about your bio and your journey. As a young man, Dave was inspired by the unique individuals in Miami's secret floating village, a sailboat anchored offshore from Miami City Hall, and I know that place well. By the time he graduated college, he lived on his own sailboat and set sail from the Bahamas with dreams and $40. His voyages took him through the Bahamas up to the US East Coast and across the Atlantic to Gibraltar, facing various challenges and gathering stories. And today, he is still gathering those stories. Good morning, Dave. How are you, my friend?
Oh, just barely perfect. And good to see you, Dr. James, Galen. Good morning.
Oh my goodness gracious. You know, Dave, as I was listening to Galen, I didn't really think about how long we've actually known each other from Florida Speakers Association, just coming to the meetings every month. And I know for years I never missed a meeting. And before the podcast, we were just talking about, how we get busy, if you will, doing things on the same time. But welcome to the podcast this morning. We're talking about something that you do well. You don't discuss it often, and that is organized planning. But what I'd like to do before we go too much into this journey, if you will, I'd like to have you take us back in your journey and just share with us a moment in time at any age, but a moment in time when you realized the benefit and value of organizing your plans.
Well, I'll give you a simple story, and it goes back, I think I was 24 years old. It was my first trip to the Bahamas. Got a little tiny boat, and I've got to cross the Gulf Stream. Think of the Gulf Stream as a river that flows within the ocean between Florida and the Bahamas. So you've got a current that flows to the north. Now, if you just set out and watch your compass and aim where you want to go, well, you're out there for 10 hours, 12 hours, flowing north at 2.5, 3 knots. You're going to end up 30 miles north of where you want to go. And that's going to put you out in the middle of the North Atlantic, north of the Bahamas, out in the middle of nowhere. So it's simple planning, but you say, okay, how long am I going to be out there? What speed am I going? How far south do I need to aim so that that current pushes me north to where I want to go instead of past where I want to go? It's a simple concept, but if you don't make that simple plan and you just head out, not compensating for the current, not compensating for the wind. Also, you want to make that crossing at night because you want to land in daylight, because you don't want to come into the Bahamas at night because they've got no lights, no markers, and plenty of coral reefs. It's all simple stuff, but you have to be aware of it. No planning, and your trip is going to turn out very different than what you thought it was going to be.
Wow. And that was at 19 years old.
That was at 24 years old.
24.
Same thing.
And a few years later, you're still sailing
A few, absolutely.
and you're still organizing those plans, but in a very, very different way in regards to your business.
No question about it.
Yeah, so Galen, leaning forward. Galen's leaning forward here.
Yeah, I would love to get into, something that I raised at the top of this conversation, the importance of having um, like-minded people around you who can help speak into your desires, your vision. And the reason I think that it's worded that way for me is because you can't share your dreams with everybody. Everyone's not mature enough. They're not responsible enough. They're not delicate enough to take care of your dreams when they're first hatched. So, what are some things and who are some people that you hang out with that you give the authority to help you develop your ideas when they're brand new?
Well, I'll start at a place that Ann and I call home, which is the National Speakers Association and that Florida chapter, the Florida Speakers Association. And being in the speaking and influence business, I think I'm on the phone with a speaking colleague at least every day. And I've had people like Bruce Turkel, who's been a fabulous friend and mentor to me. But if I'm working on a new presentation, I can go to my colleagues and say, will you watch? Will you listen? Will you give me that tough love feedback? And I get it. If I have an idea, I've got people on the, can you punch some holes in this for me? Can you help me pressure test this? And so I'll I don't think there's anything in my life I feel like I do alone because I have this community of friends, mentors, supporters. And on the flip side of that, I have zero toxic people in my life. I don't have anybody saying, Dave, you can't do that. Dave, it's not going to work. I've got friends who, if I'm off, they're going to say, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? But I don't have anybody pushing me under. And that's
Wow.
part of that principle.
Yeah, I love that because very often when you just hear the words organized planning, I get this image of someone sitting in a room, locked, the door is locked and you're like buried in papers trying to figure things out. And what I'm hearing from you is that it's just the opposite, right? It's you got to reach out to as many people as you can trust to help you pressure test your ideas to actually turn into a thing. Uh, Dr. Peter, you're one of those folks for me. So, what are your thoughts about this idea of organized planning in a community?
Yeah, it's such a great conversation overall, and I appreciate you being here there, Dave. I'm stuck with the boat thing going across the canal there to the Bahamas at such a young age, and the organized planning that needed to take place. Now, let me ask you a question around organized planning because oftentimes I chat with clients and it's not even so much the planning that gets to them, it's the anxiety about what could go wrong, right? And so now I take it back to you, Dave, and you're planning on this voyage at a young age, and stuff could really go wrong. It could go left, as you even mentioned, left very fast into the North Atlantic, which no one wants. How did you overcome that? Number one, how do you overcome it now? Number two.
Well, I think it's important for everybody to realize that being courageous is not the same thing as being fearless.
Hmm.
And there are all sorts of things that still scare me. But isn't that kind of the point of doing something? Because if we sit safe at home and we turn on the air conditioner and we curl up on the couch and we think, wow, it's so dangerous out there. This could happen and that could happen and this could happen. You know what happens to you? You get old without living any life. So, yeah, I mean, I spent 38 days sailing across the Atlantic Ocean in a wooden boat. People say, oh, that's so dangerous. I don't know. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. It was a good boat. And I had a friend with me for that crossing. I wasn't solo. But I'll tell you what, all the people on I-95 while I was out there on the expressway were probably in more danger than I was. But you don't think, oh, I really don't want to drive to work today. It's so dangerous. I could get hit by a drunk driver. I could this, I could that. We create so many what if scenarios. And to a point, it's important. And to another point, it's like, well, what if I get old and I look back and I regret not having done the things that would have really made my life better? That scares me more than any of the other stuff.
I love that. I love that philosophy. What if I don't do it? What's my life going to look like? Am I going to have regrets? And who wants to live life with full of regrets? That's what I'm hearing from you there, Dave. Yeah, fabulous. Good stuff. Right back to you, Galen.
Yeah, one of the things as I was listening to your story, I was thinking about, in this principle, they talk about how Thomas Edison failed 10,000 times before he perfected the light bulb. I'm wondering, what role does failure play in the work that you do? Failing while you're selling to the Bahamas could be life ending, right? It's certainly life changing, right? But what role does failure play in the work that you do and how you see organized planning?
Well, I could tell you about all sorts of things that I've tried and failed at. And coming back to Dr. James's question, like these what ifs, what if I fail? Well, if you fail, you'll learn something and you'll be more successful at the next attempt or the attempt after that. If we see our life in terms of, okay, I'm going to do endeavor X and I'm going to try and it may succeed or it may fail, and that's its own little story. Well, okay, maybe that story has a bad ending, but Thomas Edison, 10,000 failures. I don't think he was thinking about, oh, I failed. Do I want to give up? It's like, okay, I tried that. It didn't work. Now I've got to try some other type of filament in the bulb. And eventually he found it. It's just failure is one way to look at it, or there's that process of experimentation through which we move forward. Something didn't work. Yay, I could cross that off the list and try something else. I didn't do that on purpose, but it's my
It,
Apple monitor, but it worked. It was perfect.
it worked out. It worked out. Miss Ann, back to you.
You
Yes,
are
I was saying it would help if I come off mute. What I'd like to do is, Dave, I want to go back to the question about your mastermind group. And when you were selling, you had someone with you, which I would call your mastermind buddy. We're going to take a quick break and talk about the 13 principles. But what I'd like to do is have you give some thought of, Napoleon Hill tells us in the beginning of this principle, he says, when you consider creating plans, but not just plans, but organized plans for the accumulation of money. And he goes on to say, great wealth, great fortune, if you will. He gives us 6 practical steps. One is how much money do you want? The second is what will you do? The third one is by when do you want it by? And he goes on. But then he begins to tell us on the very first page that we should align ourselves with a group of individuals, one or more, as he calls them, a mastermind group of individuals who are willing, capable, and able to vet your plans. And so what I'd like to do is we, go to the 13 steps. Galen is going to share, Peter's going to produce, and we'll come back. But I'd like to just have you think about who were those individuals, and if it was any value to you, whether you called it a mastermind group or not, to have them vet your plans. Because as long as I've known you, I've seen the progression of your growth from a business to having a national exposure in your business, and the relationships that you've built that are business relationships and then business and business and then relationships. And so I just want to make sure that if the mastermind concept, according to what Napoleon Hill says, if it was a benefit or value, and if so, share how. So with that thought in mind, as we go to this quick commercial break, and for those of you that may have just joined us, we're having a very comfortable, if you will, conversation with my friend Dave Bricker from the Florida Speakers Association, but from so many entrepreneurial, if you will, experiences that he has had with this principle of organized planning. So Peter, video, and Galen will share. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like when we get an opportunity to share the principles because it's a great reminder as to how everything comes together. We talk about these principles each one at a time, but it's the connective tissue for me that really allows us to activate these desires that we have and to actually turn it into a thing. This applies to almost anything that you want to do. But I really want you to take a listen to the words, take a listen to the descriptions of the principles, and like I said, how they connect. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Number 1 is desire. Napoleon Hill said that everything starts with a burning desire, a compelling reason for doing what it is we do. Step 2 is faith, having belief in our ability to attain that which we desire. Step 3 is what we call autosuggestion. Autosuggestion simply means being very intentional about the things that we are pouring into our thoughts, into our brains, and into our consciousness. Our brains, our minds will receive everything automatically, but we have to work extra hard to make sure that the positive things are what we are feeding ourselves, because those positive thoughts are going to turn into positive actions. Step number 4 is specialized knowledge. No one person knows everything, even about whatever their particular area of expertise might be. And the value of the mastermind principle is using the specialized knowledge of other people. Step number 5 is imagination, the workshop of the mind. Everything starts with our imagination and our thoughts, the burning desire to transform those thoughts into our reality. In order to do that, we have to take a look at step 6, which is organized planning. That is how we crystallize our desire into action, organizing ourselves. Having the thought and not acting on the thought isn't going to get us anywhere. We have the thought, we go through the organized planning to transform that thought into action. Step number 7 is decision. What Napoleon Hill said is the mastery of procrastination. Napoleon Hill said that the antidote to procrastination is simply to make a decision and then move on that decision. Step 8 is persistence. We have to have a sustained effort which is induced by our faith in order to achieve our goals. One of Napoleon Hill's books I love, even the title, 3 Feet from Gold. Those people who became rich during the gold rush in the wild, wild west days didn't do that because they were necessarily smarter or had better information than anyone else. It's because they stayed just a little bit longer. Sometimes people left when they were just literally 3 feet from gold. So hanging in there, being persistent, is step number 8. Step number 9, the power of the mastermind, the driving force. None of us can accomplish anything on our own. Everybody, I don't care who you are, from the most prominent person to the person who might be considered the lowest on the totem pole, everybody has someone who helped them get to where they are. And the power of the mastermind is being able to use those influences around us, use the thoughts, use the knowledge, use the exploration of other people to help us in achieving our goal. Step number 10, the mystery of sex transmutation. This title can be a little confusing, but essentially what the mystery of sex transmutation means is that we oftentimes in our society think of sex as being purely physical. It is absolutely physical, But what Napoleon Hill teaches us is that sex also has an emotional element, and that sex is the strongest of our desires. That if we can take our sexual energy, transform that into positive, creative influences, it can propel us to new heights. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about the mystery of step 10, which is sex transmutation. Step number 11 is the subconscious mind, which Napoleon Hill tells us is the connecting leap between our human mind and the infinite intelligence, the source of all thought, the source of all creativity. Conscious mind, we spent some time talking about how we use that through the influence of autosuggestion and what we're feeding into our mind. Step number 12, which is the brain, the broadcasting and receiving station of thought. Final step number 13, the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom. This is the final step through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. The principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles.
All right, thank you. Just want to remind everyone, if you just joined us, and we'll come back to Galen. If you just joined us, just want to remind you that we are listening to Dave Bricker. Today, he is a speaker, trainer, and coach, helping people tell their stories through writing, speaking, designing, video, technology, and music. And I just wanted to share that because sometimes people come on after the podcast has started, and we'd like to just make sure we pay homage and honor to our guests to just share with you who we're listening to and sharing with today. Galen?
No, I want to turn this back over to you, but first, I wanted to acknowledge the folks who are joining us on YouTube. Doretha is always with us, so thank you for being with us today. Shannon Charlton, good morning to you. Jason Murray and Wyman Winbush, fantastic. Anyone watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that thumbs up icon so that we can alert the algorithm that we're talking about something positive over here, and other folks will want to join in. But yeah, I wanted to go back to you because I love the way these principles, again, they come together. But today we're doing a deep dive on organized planning, because this is how you crystallize your desire into something that you can act against. So, and back to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Dave, we were talking before the 13 Principles video and asking if you would share if the Mastermind principle played any role in your, or I should say play any role in your organized planning according to what Napoleon Hill shares in terms of this principle.
Unquestionably. And I have to come back to my speaker colleagues and again call out Bruce Turkel, who's been very helpful. Another big friend and mentor for me has been Simone Vincenzi, who runs gtex.co.uk. He teaches people how to create high converting webinars. Will Izell has been a copywriting mentor. All of these people, some of them interact with each other, some of them don't. But before I launch something, before I go ahead with something, I go to them for pressure testing. It's just part of my process. I do the creativity, they pressure test it. Then I launch, I succeed, I fail, I go back, and we do a post-mortem on it, or we take it apart, figure out what it is, how can we tweak it. But without my colleagues, I forget it. Who wants to be in solitary confinement? That's no way to run a life or a business.
Wow. So then that would suggest then that you would agree with what Napoleon Hill says in this principle when he tells us that we should ally ourselves with a group of as many individuals as you may need for the creation. And you said it very well when you talked about you create but then they help that creation become a reality. Now, you mentioned a couple of people, and I want to, we know Bruce, and Bruce, I'm going to tag you on this because I don't think that you get enough credit from all of us, from Malachi Monroe, from Ione McNeil, from Ann McNeil, and from so many of us in the not just our chapter of Florida Speakers Association, but the National Speakers Association. You've been the glue for so many of us. So we want to give you that respect. But you mentioned another name, and I did not know how to spell
Simone
it.
Vincenze,
Could you
V I
spell it?
N V I S I M O N E Vincenze. Vincenze. He's Italian. He lives in London.
Is that a B or a V?
A V as in Victor.
Vincenze.
CENZE.
Okay, we'll
And
tag him too.
he's got a wonderful community, GTEX, GTEX, which stands for Growing Together Exponentially.co.uk. And he's brilliant. His program's worth checking out.
Perfect. And Will Ezel?
Will Ezel, Ezell.
Who else?
And you won't find much of Will anymore. He's kind of a secret in a way, but he's an amazing copywriter, a student of human behavior, and he understands the art of influence and persuasion. Selling without sleazery, I call it.
Ooh, I like that. Sewing without sleazery. Now, the reason I wanted to get the names because the second step Napoleon Hill shares with us about organized planning in your mastermind group when you form this, that he says that before you form this alliance, you want to ensure and you want to decide what advantages and benefits that you may offer them and they may offer you in return for the cooperation. And as what I love about what you just did is as you walk through each one of them, you told me the benefit. And so, we know that nobody, if you will let me sit like this. I think that people will go out of their way to support people they know, like, and trust. The know, like, and trust factor, I like to call it. And in sharing what you have given us is an excellent example of your mastermind. Now, I want to go to another question I always like to ask everyone, and that is, what was your first introduction to this book? Not necessarily the principle, but this book, Think and Grow Rich.
I can't remember exactly when. I think my first serious introduction to the book is when you came to do a session for the Florida Speakers Association Speaker Academy, to the Connie Gordon Speaker Academy. Before then, I'd heard of it. I'd probably seen a few YouTube videos or read a few articles. And then I remember in advance of your coming to do that workshop, because I was running the academy and I need to at least look like I know what I'm talking about, I went and did some deeper diving into that book.
Wow, that was a long time ago. Wow. Now I see you smiling, Peter. So we have this connectivity among the three of us that we know when the other one is not necessarily raising a virtual hand, but a spiritual hand that the others pick up. Go ahead, Peter.
Oh, I like that. The spiritual hand there. And yes, I got to use that moving forward. Good stuff. You know, Dave, before we chatted about our careers and our how we educate ourselves, which kind of goes hand in hand with this organized planning thing overall. I'm curious how you got to be doing what you were doing. What's your expertise? Does your expertise lie in this area? And if not, what did that organized planning need to look like in order to get to be the expert that you are today? So I'd love for you to give us a little bit of that journey, if you don't mind.
Well, like many people, I mean, imagine back in elementary school and the teacher says, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And somebody says, "A doctor, a fireman, a scientist," right? Nobody says speaker or professional storyteller, or, I mean, this is stuff that hits us later. So planning is great, but plans change. And I think part of planning is to be able to be flexible enough to realize, hey, this plan isn't satisfying me anymore. This plan got me here. Now I'm going to go there. So when I first got interested in sailing, it's because I met these wacky people who didn't have a penny to rub between their two fingers. And they said, I don't care. I'm getting in my boat and I'm going to the Bahamas or South America or across the ocean or up to North Carolina. I don't care. I don't need money to do this. I have my sailboat. I've got food on board, jar of peanut butter, roll of toilet paper. Let's go. And these people got in and out of such amazing trouble, and I loved their stories. Subconsciously, part of me said, well, I didn't realize you didn't have to go to a movie theater or read a book to have adventures. I want some of that. And then I suppose the plan was, okay, I need a sailboat. And before I finished college, I bought this little 26-foot sailboat for $3,000, thinking it would be a stopgap. But by the time I graduated, I was living on board, having the time of my life, not paying any rent, not paying any bills, living out in the sailboat anchorage. Okay, well, now I've got a sailboat and I've got it in sailing shape. Well, gee, I need a place to go. And then those kinds of adventures started. Well, okay, well, what do you do with that? Well, wait a second. Sailing is an incredible metaphor for life and business, right? Because everybody has oceans to cross. Everybody needs to learn to trust their compass. Everybody needs to hold the tiller and keep a straight course and stay focused. Everybody needs to learn the rules of the road. We need to learn counterintuitive principles like when the wind is blowing too hard, you can go faster by taking some sail down because you're not dragging the rudder sideways through the water, trying to keep the boat on course. There are so many lessons in that. And long story short, it's like, well, I've got business lessons and life lessons. I never went sailing thinking, well, this is going to prep me for a career in speaking. But the plans change, the context changes, and you look back at the things you've done in your life and you say, what can I do with this? And how can I put it to work for the betterment of other people?
I love that. And I love that how you were able to look back on your journey and see how that road turned because maybe of stimuli, environment, what was presented before you, your interest, your passions, your purpose. And it sounds like you are fulfilling that last one there, that your purpose now, because you were able to be intentional about this journey.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe even surround yourself, as you mentioned before, with the right people around you as well. Is that somewhat accurate?
Absolutely. And believe me, I had sailing mentors along the way too. When I was getting involved with that, I had John Nation was you won't find him anywhere on the web, but he was a former planetarium director who had built a replica of a 1911 Nova Scotian fishing schooner. Was one of those classic Jimmy Buffett, born 100 years too late kind of characters, but he taught me celestial navigation. He taught me all sorts of stuff about sailing. So wherever we go, whatever our endeavors are, we find these mentors and these people. That mastermind group is critical. You can succeed alone, but then great, you don't even have anybody to call and thank or share your success with. I don't think we were put here on this earth to be alone. I work alone all day. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a big socialite. I'm an introvert, but yeah, my community, my groups of friends and mentors and people who support me and kick my butt when I need it, it's indispensable.
Yeah. Put another way there, Dave. None of us achieves true success on our own. Galen, I know you know about that, sir.
Hey, I am always fascinated by how successful people are able to not avoid mistakes, but leverage those mistakes to navigate to where they ultimately needed to be. It might not have been where they intended to be, but it's where they ultimately needed to be. Can you think of a time when something got off course? You ended in a place that was maybe not part of your original plan, but oh my gosh, good thing it happened that way because that allowed you to do this other thing that was much greater, maybe even than what you had planned.
I could go on and on with stories like that where uh maybe you on the sailboat, maybe I got weathered in somewhere, but I got weathered in with somebody I wouldn't have met otherwise. And it's as simple as that. And there was an online community that I built the whole website for. I built all the discussion forums. I built all of the gamification reward systems. I built and I built and I built, and I was ready to launch this thing. And then I came up with the idea for Speakypedia, and I thought, wow, I better shelve this whole straighttalkspeakers.com thing because I don't really have enough of an audience attractant for it yet. But Speakypedia, what a great brand. What a great thing. And I I mean, I could still go back and flip the switch and launch that community, but you know what? It's not right. Now, I don't think of that as a failure, and I don't think of Speakypedia necessarily as a success because they're all part of the journey. And success is one of those concepts. It's like happiness. I think people think like one day I'm going to be happy or one day I'm going to be successful. And if your journey is progressing in the right direction, that's happiness. That is success. It is not a definitive point like, okay, I'm successful. I can crop that up. I'm happy now. Check it off my list. I'm done. Because then you'll go get yourself in trouble to find something else to get out of so that you can feel happy and successful again. So happiness is a journey, success is a journey, and all of these things that we call failures and successes are just the mountains and the valleys on that journey.
Fantastic, fantastic. Miss Ann, back to you.
Yeah, I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes. My goodness, I like this. I have to just repeat something you shared because it is really all a journey. I like sharing about the fact that you must have a dream to have a dream come true. And that is a journey because once you achieve whatever it is that you are desiring, if you don't have that next thing already set up, you settle. And when you share that happiness and success, it's just all a journey. And I think that for many of us, the earlier we realize that, the happier we will become because there's no arriving. And a lot of times we don't, we don't get that there's no arriving, right? I want to go back to something that is behind you. There's an instrument on the wall there behind you.
There
And
is.
I am remembering many years of being entertained at many of the National Speakers Association conferences. And for those of you that's listening, if you're not familiar with NSA, the National Speakers Association, please Google it. And Wyman, somebody help me in the chat. If you can put the website in the chat.
I've got it.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. We are going to have our annual meeting, which is called Influence, next month, actually the end of the month, the beginning of August. And I was just sharing that Dave and a group of his mastermind buddies, I'm going to call them, they perform uh, uh, during the evening, oftentimes at the conference. So can you share with us a story about the guitar behind you? And I want to go back to the principal. I want to go back to the principal. And what impact, if any, does this principal have on that instrument?
Well, I remember when I was 16 years old, And I traded an old car stereo for an old junky electric guitar, thinking that, well, I'm not a musician. I'm not going to learn to play it, but I bet I can make some horrible Jimi Hendrix noises on it and annoy my parents and express my teenage angst and do what kids do, right? And then somebody showed me a few chords and I got absolutely hooked. And at that point, I thought, I want a real Fender Stratocaster. And I used to go, here's that desire component, right? Well, I'm a kid, I've got no income. And I would go to Ed's used guitars, a couple times a month. And they always had a bunch of used strats in there, and I'd play them, whatever it was. And I got a job uh, putting carpet samples back on the rack and vacuuming floors at Miami Rug Company. But that was my after school job. And because I wanted that guitar, and I got the money together. Took me a little while, and I went into the store, and of course, Ed's looking at me like, okay, Dave's come back in to wear out my Stratocasters again. But no, no, no. There it was, that cream colored, beat up old 1973 Fender Strat that looked like Jimi Hendrix personally burned it. And I don't play a lot of electric these days. I play mostly acoustic, but I'll never get rid of that guitar. Uh, it's just something very special to me, and I do pick it up once in a while and play some electric. But since then, musical instruments and playing music, especially jazz music and some other styles, has just been I would say that and sailing are my two drugs. Something I do every day. I don't need to perform in front of audiences, but if I'm working on something and I'm feeling like I just can't focus any deeper, it's like time to take a break and go sit in the living room and play some music. But then I do get together and connect with other people. For example, at Influence, there are a group of us who find a quiet corner every year and we come together. It's one of the reasons we go to the conference, is because those evenings sharing tunes are wonderful. And it's a whole different level that you can connect with other people on. Sharing tunes, improvising, singing together. It's just a great way to connect with wonderful people. And I've done that all over the world.
Yeah, I think it's important when we talk about having these plans, and I go back to the questions that I opened the podcast with. And when you think about just the idea of providing some kind of self-analysis and some kind of personal inventory, do you ever have that kind of reflection when you're organizing your plans? If you hit on something and you've talked about it actually this morning, but I'll go back to this idea of being qualified or certified to achieve a certain goal as a part of your plans. To me, that's a part of the self-analysis and personal inventory. Can you share an experience where you were on task, on track to hit a goal and realize that you may have needed certain skill sets that you did not have, or certification or something that you needed to have to take your business or life or career to another level? And when you answer that, I'm going to go to Galen because I know he's had to do that. And I'm going to go to Dr. Peter James. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I think it's critically important right before we talk about the annual meeting, but I think it's critically important for each of us to be honest with ourselves. And that's the point I want to make as a part of this organized planning principle. Oftentimes we want to make plans, but we may not be as honest with ourselves in confessing or admitting or determining if we really have what it takes to make or hit that goal. And sometimes we have to take a step back, properly prepare, and go to the next step. Because can you share any particular instance you may have had that situation?
Well, this happens to me all the time, perhaps not in the setting you're thinking of, because it's not often that I'll pursue a certification or something. I'm more of a self-starter. It's like, don't make me sit in a class for 12 weeks. Tell me what's on the final. I'll be next week. I'll be back next week. I'll study it. I'll learn it. I'm a lifelong learner. I love to learn. So I'm always working on technical projects. And so there are skills that I don't have. And I go to YouTube University. How do I do that? Or if there's something I'm trying to create with, say, JavaScript, I will go to ChatGPT and say, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. I know enough about programming structure to ask it for what I want and guide it. And I fight with ChatGPT, and I get some pretty cool programming content out of it. Things like that, knowing what to ask for. I'll give you another example. There is wonderful software for video editing called DaVinci Resolve. I had been an Adobe After Effects user for many years and hadn't been dissatisfied with it, but DaVinci offered some features. Well, I don't know that one. I don't know how it works. I opened it up and started playing with it, and I thought, wow, I don't know what to do with it. Back to YouTube University. And so for the past 2 or 3 months, I've been editing all my video in DaVinci Resolve. The world changes constantly, and you have to change with it. I'm not sure that many of the certification bodies, and certainly not the educational institutions, are prepared to keep up with the pace of change. And what we need to do is constantly say, wow, I don't know how to do that. I'm not ready to do that. Do I want to invest the time in learning, or do I want to hire someone in Far-Away-istan to do it for $12 an hour and get on with my life? And then off you go. But you evaluate whether you can do it, whether you can learn to do it, and whether it's worthwhile, and you move forward.
You just answered my question, and that is the benefit and value of the self-analysis question. Thank you. You hit that out of the park. Galen?
Yeah, for me, I tell this story often. It was when I decided that I wanted to be a coach. I spent 30 years in corporate America. And anytime you give some of your employees development advice, they call that coaching. And so when it was time for me to leave corporate America, I said, well, I'll just be a coach. And I actually started hanging out with Dr. Peter, and he said, well, you're kind of passionate about this leadership stuff, but if you're going to call yourself a coach, you actually need to go through the training to become a coach. And I tell you I say all the time, I was incredibly offended when he told me that, because I've been coaching for years. What are you talking about? And I went to try to get a client engagement, and they said, wow, yeah, you're pretty good at this, great background, but you're not certified as a coach. So, we can't really use you. And so I went and got the certification, and it was 45 minutes into that first session when I realized what I was doing was not coaching. It was advising, it was consulting, but that certification process really just elevated what I thought I was trying to do, and it brought me into the space that I'm really, really passionate about now. So that is an example of where that certification, that self assessment was really, really important. Wouldn't have done it if it weren't for one of my mastermind buddies there.
And it's such an important thing for coaching to get training. I got some training in that too. And because a consultant brings smart answers, but a coach asks wise questions. And it's a very important difference in terms of mindset. And I think in terms of effectiveness, because you're leading people to their own truth. Because if you give them advice, they say, thanks for the advice, Galen. And then they go, oh, that's Galen's advice. I can ignore it. You lead them to their own truth by asking those questions, and then they're stuck with it. It belongs to them.
Absolutely. Dr. Peter, what about you? And then also talk about that annual meeting.
Yeah, a great conversation, great insight. I have to say, it was instilled in me growing up. Education, education, education. Get your education, and that will be the key to success. While there is some truth to that, that's not all there is, as all of us know, right? But sometimes I have a tendency to dive on in to the education without strategizing what this journey needs to look like. So I have a lot of education but I need to spend more time for myself on the execution, planning and execution for that matter overall. Amity, I'll see you shaking your head so feverishly. Chime in, please.
No, you said everybody know that. I'm shaking my head.
Oh.
No, 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 everybody don't. That's why we keep getting these degrees, but go ahead.
Yeah. So education is a component, but there's so much more that needs to be added on to, and there's so much more for me is surrounding myself with wise counsel, people who are on the same trajectory, people who have my best interest in mind, people who I can also help as well. And I sometimes find those individuals, not even sometimes, I always find those individuals at the annual meeting that we have every single year coming up in Boca Raton, Florida. This is not a conference, as Ann McNeil says all the time. This is an annual meeting where you can be held accountable for your goals, your plans, your strategies moving forward. It also allows you the time to reflect on your journey, as we've been discussing here a little bit as well. So if you don't know where that place is for you or who those individuals are for you, you might need to reach out, number one, but also plan on attending this meeting that you see there on the screen so that you can dive in deeper and fulfill your destiny as is described. Good stuff, eh?
All right. Well, we're going to start landing this plane, and we will start with you, Galen, since Dr. Peter just gave some of his pointers, except how we can reach you, Dr. James. If you want to, let me just come back to you if you want to share with everybody.
Yeah, I'll jump on in and then I'll pass the baton over to my dear friend Galen Bingham. My name is Dr. Peter A. James. I am the high performance coach. You can find me at shiftyourmindset.com or on LinkedIn at Dr. Peter A. James. That's at DrPeterAJames. Stay tuned. Got some stuff brewing, a book, some other courses. I'm just gonna tease them right now for you, Ann. But Galen, what you got brewing, my friend?
Oh my gosh, such a great conversation. I always enjoy talking with old friends and new friends about how do you leverage these principles to have success on purpose. My name is Galen Bingham. I'm the leadership strategist. You can find me all over social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. But the best and the most fun way to get a hold of me is to check out my podcast, Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. We talk to leaders literally all over the world about the whiskeys they drink, the music they listen to, and what they think it really takes to be an effective leader. I double dog dare you to try us at least once, guarantee that you'll get something that will help you move at least one or two steps closer to your goals.
All right. And of course, our special guest today, Dave, if you want to share with everybody how they can reach you, and if you have anything special you'd like to offer for them to connect with you.
Well, if you want to say it, share it, or sell it, bring me your story. I'll help you tell it. I'm Dave Bricker. You can reach me at speakipedia.com. And that's about it. Speakipedia.com. And thank
Share
you all
it.
for having me on today.
I'm sorry. Share it, tell it, or sell it.
Say it, share it, or sell it.
Oh my goodness. This is awesome. Please connect with Dave. This is a phenomenal idea, Dave. And they can connect with you by going to, he has it at the bottom of the screen on his name, but he's going to repeat it again, please.
It's Speakipedia, like Wikipedia, but it's not affiliated with that. Speakipedia.com. It's the encyclopedia of speaking and storytelling.
Perfect. Perfect. Check it out. Dave, you have blessed us today. Thank you so very much. So much so I'm going to have to see how I can do my podcast from the next Florida Speakers Association meeting. Oh, 7 o'clock in the morning. I'll have to be there by 6. So we'll make that happen. We'll make that happen. Thank you so very much. And again, my name is Ann McNeil, and I am the Master Wealth Builder, helping you to build a stronger and better life and business utilizing this philosophy. But if you really want to get organized and have a process, you can get my book, which is entitled How to Start and Run a Successful Mastermind Group. And I contend that if it's good enough for Jeff Hazlett and Les Brown and many others, you may want to take a look, but only if you are interested in having a better quality of life in each and every area of your life. You can connect with me by texting the number 59925. You can text the number 59925 and just put in the chat the word "and." That's ANN. Of course, that's my name. And that number again is 59925. You can text that number and put ANN in the chat and connect with me to get my 6 points business plan. And until next time, we want to thank all of you for joining in, all of you on that have blessed us every single Saturday, and some are new. Diane, Jerika, okay, Wyman, Dorita, Carla, all of you. And Carla will be coming. So thank you, Carla, in advance for agreeing to come on the podcast. She's always here, and she's always on Saturday, and she's always on Friday also. Jason Murray, Shannon Carlton, again, Dorita. Thank you, everybody. And please remember, if you have not subscribed to the YouTube, please make sure you subscribe. And as Galen likes to always remind us, click that bell and make a comment and share this podcast. And until next time, we want to bid you all farewell, and remember to continue to think and grow richer, and we will see you next time. All right. Thank you.